once you review Out of the Further, it follows you back. Let's talk about it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So today we're going to be discussing or debating Insidious, Out of the Further. But before we get into that, you already know what time it is. Movie recommendation time. So I'm currently watching season 3 of Lioness. For those who don't know what it is literally a spy thriller who follows a leader called, I believe her name's Jo, and she's like the head of the CIA team, and she enlists like female operatives who are also known as lionesses, and they pretty much go undercover in multiple, I think it's called like War on Terror missions. It's a good watch. I think you have to start from season 1 if you actually want to jump onto this show, but I would definitely say it is action packed. I don't want to say it's informative because I don't know if it's true to, you know, the subject matter. So I don't know if that is what's actually going on in this, the terminologies and the stuff. But I would definitely say from an entertainment perspective, it's definitely fun to watch. And the character arcs it's pretty good as well. Yeah, it's continuous, it's not closed episodes. So I would definitely say you need to watch from season 1 if it's something that you would be interested in watching. But I'll definitely say check it out. It's really, really good. I'll definitely say you guys should tune into that.
The best thing I watched this week is The Postman, which is a 1997 post-apocalyptic adventure movie, which follows the story of a drifter who is trying to survive in a post-apocalyptic world where he is essentially earning his keep by performing half-remembered Shakespeare plays for villagers in exchange for food. One day he encounters a crashed truck in the wilderness, which turns out to belong to a postman from before the collapse. And he takes the postman's uniform and clothing and the letters that have survived, and he begins pretending to be a postman from the reconstructed United States, essentially saying out far east they are rebuilding the United States and they are reestablishing the mail, and I am here to deliver your mail, right? And that way he earns his keep, and the people start giving him food and shelter as he travels between the towns. And relatively quickly, it turns out that he has inspired a new generation that has never known anything but death and stagnation and decline into building something again. And young people start signing up as postmen, and the guy who starts out as a fraud and as a con artist eventually becomes a genuine symbol for hope and reconstruction in this post-apocalyptic world that is run by warlords and raiders. So when this movie came out, it was a massive flop. It's a 3-hour self-indulgent vanity project for Kevin Costner, who stars in and directs this. But it's one of those movies where it's carried by good ideas, and it's one of the few post-apocalyptic movies that actually talk about things like the reconstruction and what challenges there actually are in a post-apocalyptic world. It's not a survivalist power fantasy, but rather talks about how society works and how fragile the world we know is and how hard it is to rebuild it once it's been damaged and so on. And if you can sit through a 3-hour schmaltzy patriotic mess, there's actually a really good story in there. That doesn't sound like high praise, but there's not a lot of movies that have this kind of approach to the post-apocalypse. And I just enjoyed it based on that. It just don't expect good pacing, expect a lot. Like there's a scene where the postman collects a letter from like an 8-year-old boy that lives out on a farm somewhere. And the guy rides past him, and the boy comes out and holds up the letter, and there's epic music. And the postman grabs the letter, and the boy watches him ride off into the sunset carrying the mail. And that scene is 3 minutes long. So that's the kind of movie this is. But it is a really cool story, and I'm actually reading a book now, which is quite different, but has the same ideas. I think it's absolutely worth a watch. Like, it's not action-packed. There are action scenes in this, there are battle scenes in this, because the postmen eventually start drawing the attention of the local warlord, who really wants things to remain the way they are, and the postmen, by being symbols of civilization, are a threat to his empire that he's carved out. And so that there's a conflict there. I don't know if it's actually good or not, but it's really interesting.
What is it called again, sorry?
The Postman.
The Postman. Okay, I've heard of that one before, so I'll check that out. When did it come out?
1997.
Okay, cool. I'll check that one out.
So it's really interesting. There's not a lot of movies like it. If you just like the post-apocalyptic genre and want to see a slightly different take on it, it's really interesting to watch.
Okay, well, looks like it's time for the main event. Daddy G, please do your thing.
So Insidious, Out of the Further, is a supernatural horror movie. It is the 5th movie in the Insidious franchise. It follows the story of Gemma, who grew up with a single mother who was possessed by demons. and who ended up killing herself as a result. Gemma, now grown up, has a daughter of her own and is trying to live life as best as she can when the same demons are beginning to reach out to her and she's beginning to see weird stuff. It begins to look like somebody or something is coming after her, and the story then unfolds from there. So, what did we think of Insidious out of the further?
I would say I had a generic experience with this one. There were things that I liked. I did like the new concept that they brought in with the whole courier concept. And I did like the creepy elderly neighbors. They just made the film a bit more interesting. Overall, I'd say that my experience with this one was okay.
So I had not seen an Insidious movie before. In my mind, that had always been kind of the poster child for generic low effort horror. And even after having seen this, I'm not sure whether that's correct or not. But I'd never really checked it out. And even when I tried to watch the first one just to get an idea before watching this one, it's not on any of the streamers. I would actually have had to buy it somewhere. And I wasn't that interested, let's just say. So I went into this completely blind, no idea what the rules were, what the cosmology was, what the Insidious movies are about. And in the first third or so, all my prejudices were confirmed. So the first act or the first 45 minutes or so are very much generic horror stuff where creepy things happen because they're creepy, and the objective is to gross out the audience, and it relies a lot on visceral horror. There's scenes relating to dentistry and you can fill in the blanks there. It's exactly what you think it is. If you've not seen it, if you imagine any horror scene involving dentists, and that's exactly what it is. There's a lot of jump scares. There's a lot of walking down dark corridors, being scared because you heard a creepy noise. And I was kind of watching my watch a little bit, saying, okay, it's going to be another hour 20 or so of this. I was already preparing like my talking points for how generic this is. And then the actual story starts. Then it actually got interesting. I actually kind of like the main character, although there's not much to her. There actually is an idea in this. And I think part of the problem here is that at least a third of the movie is filler and padding. And then the rest is a fairly simple supernatural heist story about generational trauma and overcoming that trauma, but in interesting ways. It's one of those cliches of horror in the last few years where people go to that well very often, and often it's not very interesting. Often it's very, very rote. And here it at least had something to say about the topic, and it had an angle. And I actually kind of liked it. And I think the ending was the best part in this. And along the way, I don't think I ever was really impressed with the movie. But as the time went on, I was having an increasingly okay time. That's my review. So let's talk about it.
I'll definitely say that the fervor was used as a metaphor for being trapped by unaddressed generational trauma and grief. But you said it had something to say about it. What did it have to say about it? Because I don't know.
Yeah, so I don't think this is high art. I don't think this is a deep story. I don't think this is going to be a classic. It seems to me like this movie is making its money. It's already made, I think, 3 times its budget. So it's already, or for 4 times, it's already well into profit territory, and it's only going to continue from there. Insidious movies are very cheap to make, and they always bring in the money. And so they are going to keep making these forever, probably. And that's why I was so surprised that there actually was an interesting angle to this. So it is not simply generational trauma. Generational trauma typically involves the parents abusing the children and then the children becoming the abusers or being defined by that abuse or something like some variation of that. And this was different. This was Gemma being haunted by having grown up with a mother who was haunted. And Gemma perceived that as depression, alcoholism, mental illness, some version of this, right? And when she starts experiencing these hauntings herself, she starts to become her mother. There are several scenes in this where Gemma's behavior directly parallels what her mother did 20 years earlier. And the horror here, like we've always talked about how the objective of horror is not to convince the audience that this is real, it's to remind them of a time when they were scared or to present them with an idea that is relatable, that is universal enough that anybody can get on board with being weirded out or scared by that, right? And here it is the idea that you are a bad parent, this idea that you are not better than the previous generation, even though you your entire life you thought you were, and without even knowing it, you are becoming them in the worst possible way. And I think that hits home. Like that doesn't directly map to my experience, but I can totally understand why that would scare somebody. Like imagine if you have parents who are very strict, like to the point of being stifling, and you grow up promising yourself that you're going to be better, and then you have a child, and then you find yourself exactly like your parents. That must be terrifying, because it kind of suggests that there's something wrong with you in a way that is not really avoidable, that you can do nothing about. And when Gemma realizes that she's beginning to act like her mother, and Maya is starting to be afraid of her in the same way that Gemma was afraid of her mother 20 years earlier, that is genuinely terrifying. And Gemma really at least sold me on the idea that this is terrifying. That comes after about an hour of build-up, where we see how she's trying to keep her life in check, where she tries to be a good mother, but on the flip side of that is unable to let go of her baggage, like literal baggage that's sitting in her garage. And Maya keeps asking questions about grandma, and Gemma keeps saying when you're older, which is not really saying Maya is not ready to talk about this. It's saying Gemma is not ready to talk about this, right? Because you can explain to a 9-year-old, oh, grandma was ill and it was very difficult living with her, and if she never got better. And that was very difficult, and I'm trying to give you a better life. Like, if I had to explain this to a 9-year-old, I would find a way, right? So it is Gemma who is not ready to talk about this and to confront this. And now she's becoming her mother. And then it starts building on that when she goes into the further and starts communing with her mother's spirit. And we start seeing things from her mother's perspective. And we actually see that the mother was protecting her the entire time. That she, on some level, knew what was going on. She was doing her best to limit Cyrus's influence on her so that he could not go after Gemma. And I think that's cool. I don't think it's a masterful execution or anything like that, but there are several scenes in this, and I think when you line it all up, there is a progression there, and there's an arc there that I think works. I wish there was less filler in this movie, and I wish the actual horror stuff was less generic, because a lot of the time I couldn't tell you what the ghosts were actually trying to do or why they were behaving in a certain way. It's just very clearly written as a checklist of let's put some creepy stuff in there because we have to hit a certain runtime. But when you dig down into the actual character stuff, I think it works. And I did not expect it to.
I think the portrayal of a ghost was to kind of just show that the world was pretty much their playground. I think the whole generational trauma. So I think the ghosts were kind of, in a way, their behavior was portrayed as kids in a way, because number one, they needed a guardian, and obviously that guardian was Cyrus. Number two, they were acting very chaotic, just like children as well. And obviously, as soon as they, broke into the real world, they were acting chaotic, hectic, and they were just all over the place. So I think the idea of the world being their playground was something which aligned with pretty much the theme of the movie as well. And in terms of what you were saying about the generational curses and, just the points that you're making about Gemma and generational curses, I'll definitely agree with that, actually. I didn't see it at first, but I'll definitely see, especially when she just wouldn't speak about her grandma to her daughter, that is definitely something where you could see how generational curses can slowly manifest into something which traps you. And obviously that's what it built up to with Gemma, because she was slowly going to be trapped into the other world where Cyrus was trapped before. I agree with that. I never saw it before, I'll be honest with you, because when my first experience with this movie, I said to myself, this just seems like some generic, what do you guys say, schmuck? I don't know what you guys say.
Yeah,
it just felt very generic. But based on what you said, I was like, okay, that does make sense, and it does kind of like it falls in line with pretty much what you said. So I'll agree. So it looks like there is more to it than just it being a generic experience. But that doesn't mean
it's good.
Yeah. I was gonna say that, but at the same time, I thought it was generic, and I just thought there wasn't really much about the film, as in like they wasn't really saying anything about the film. However, they were actually saying something about the film, so I have to give them their props.
I think the distinctive part is entirely in the second half. There's like a transition. In the beginning, I think it's very generic, and then over time it becomes more specific as we go into Gemma's story, and Gemma starts confronting her mother's spirit, and that forces her to deal with what she's been burying the entire time, right? But in the beginning, I think it is entirely generic. So, for instance, all the stuff about the dentist stuff, I think, first of all, I already wasn't looking, because some things just get to you, right? And tooth stuff just gets, like, when I go to the dentist and they want to show me the pictures, I say no thanks, just give me the summary, right? It just grosses me out, and seeing that in a movie is less especially revolting. And even in hindsight, there's not a lot related to that where I would say, okay, I understand why it's there and what purpose it serves. So, for instance, when one of the cultists, is it Lester? And in any case, the like that cultist shows up at her practice and gets a cleaning from her, and it turns straight into nightmare fuel and like a dream sequence. And I think it's the first time, one of the first times she brings something back from the further, right? Where like he pulls her into the further, and that's where she encounters, at least for the first time, and Elise kind of allows her to escape, or helps her escape, and she brings, I think, Elise's diary with her from the further, right? Like that's I think that's the first time that happens. So it's significant in that way. But why he went there? Like, is it just to apply pressure to her? But why is going to her dental practice in the middle of the day, where there's like cameras and everything? Like, why is that? Why is that how they're doing it? I don't know. It just seemed to be an excuse to put in like a horror sequence about evil dentists and just like dental related gross out horror. And I didn't like that at all. But then once we got into the whole siege on the house and the plan to trap Cyrus, I think that's where it gets a lot more interesting.
I don't know. I see what you mean. I don't know if it served the purpose, but I just enjoyed that scene in terms of, just the horror factor of things. It was definitely grotesque.
Also, the thing about the pillow fort.
But that was good as well. So you didn't like that scene?
It looks good. It looks good. It's tense, but I want stuff to mean something, and I'm not sure it really does. Like what? Like maybe if you really try, you can connect it to something, because the pillow fort is Maya's creation, and it's about play, and it's supposed to be like fun, right? There's not supposed to be anything sinister about it, and the demons are corrupting the idea of the pillow fort, right? But it seems to me like in a truly great movie, or in a really good movie, that whole sequence would be constructed in a way to actually say something about Gemma and her state of mind, and why the demons pick that in particular, and why they haunt her in that way. It just seems to me like people just had the idea of being trapped in a pillow fort, like with infinite corridors that you can't get out of, and when she pushes between kind of the cushions, and it's like very claustrophobic, and the camera is really right up in her face. It's a cool shot. First of all, Backrooms did the exact same shot just 2 months ago or 3 months ago. So it's not like, it feels a little bit generic, and like, I'm sure I've seen this in more movies as well. But it remains at the level of, it's a cool shot, and you can have a cool shot that also means something. And if there was like a method to it, like I have this in other horror movies too, where I want the specifics of what the evil entity is doing to mean something. It doesn't have to be some big allegory, but it should be something related to what the entity is and what its target is and what its powers are and how it operates and so on, right? Like it should connect to other things in the story. And with a lot of these things, I have a feeling they just put it in because it's a creepy image.
But with the fort that they build, with that scene, because she only enters that world whenever she falls asleep. So obviously, and she doesn't realize that she enters that world whenever she falls asleep until she sees I think it was the scene where she actually realized when this boyfriend was sleeping with her. But what I was going to say in that scene, didn't it serve a purpose? Because wasn't that the scene when one of the demons had some sort of pin and took her blood or something like that?
She takes the pin from the dream into the real world, right? I did not pick up on the idea that they did that in order to get her blood, because they don't seem to be using her blood for anything else after this, right?
But that's something which I was a bit confused, because he did purposefully literally stick it into her hand. So then obviously when she brought it over into the real world, she took it off, and then that scene alone seemed like it was significant. I'm not too sure what the reason was for it, because I don't think it later explained. I don't know, actually. I was going to say, was that because she always had the power to bring demons over? I was going to say, was that act alone the act that enabled her to bring the demons over? However, she's always had that gift.
So she does need to practice, especially when Cyrus kidnaps Maya, when it turns out that Maya has the same gift and she's essentially unprotected because she's just with the neighbor. And so when they can't go after Gemma, they start going after Maya instead. And they do this thing where they force her to transition back and forth between the physical world and the further over and over again, right? Like, and every time it happens, she brings more of the demons with her, right? So every time a courier does this, the connection gets wider and more things can come through. So I think the overarching purpose is that the demons want her. Are they demons? They're ghosts, right? Cyrus is like a sorcerer, I guess, and all the other beings are ghosts, right? That are trapped in the further and basically want to come come back, right? So everything they do is kind of aimed towards making her transition between the further and back again. And every time she does, she becomes a stronger courier, and eventually she will be strong enough to be useful to Cyrus and the cult. That's the overall idea.
Okay, I understand the concept of inheritance, right? So passing down supernatural burdens and gifts, etc. I get that. However, with the daughter, Maya, I believe, there wasn't really any inkling that she had the gift as well. It was kind of something like when it was revealed, it just felt like oh, she's got a gift rather than there was a story when it comes to her kind of like revelation of her having the actual gift. Because when they actually revealed it, I was thinking that felt a bit random because they even showed like flashbacks and moments of Maya before the revelation, and those flashbacks didn't do anything for me. Like it pretty much the flashbacks. I'm sure they were trying to make it seem like they were clues that kind of shows that she has the gift, but I didn't feel like that at all. I felt like that it was just kind of like random. I don't know how you felt about that.
I don't think there was any foreshadowing at all that Maya has the gift. Now, the idea that this is inherited is definitely there. It fits, right? It makes sense that Maya would have it as well. But I don't think it's foreshadowed at all. You could imagine a scene in which Maya dreams and she's actually tapping into the further just a little bit and something comes back with her, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't, like, it's subtle in the beginning and it's barely there or whatever. But in hindsight, you can see, okay, this is where the ability starts manifesting and she can't control it. And she would have to train in the way that her mother and grandmother trained to do this. But I don't think that's there at all. I think that in that sense, it comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, I agree. How do you feel about Cyrus though?
He appears in the earlier movies, right?
No, I don't think so. I think he even said in this one that he was new. Because they said previously, she mentioned, I forgot what her name was, but she's what's her name?
Elise, the old woman.
Yes, Elise. She even mentioned that there was a different villain in the previous movies that was defeated, and then Cyrus is pretty much the new one. So yeah, he new to the franchise.
So if it's like, I kind of assumed that he was an established character because again, I've not seen the previous 4 movies. If he's a new character, then he basically doesn't get an introduction. Although I'm not sure he needs much.
The VHS tapes was pretty much his introduction in a way.
Yeah, there's exposition there, and I think this is the second time this year where I think this was in Together, right? Last year, a year ago, where the main characters go into somebody's house and the evidence is playing on TV, on a videotape. that was in that movie as well. So I don't know if Hollywood writers just think this is a good way of doing this, but it seems to have become a trope, and I don't like it. I think it's really contrived. In this case, it kind of made sense because they were essentially watching sermons, right? And they had a whole box full of the tapes, and they're clearly watching them on infinite repeat and all of that, right? So it's not like it didn't make sense, but as a storytelling device, it's a little bit obvious, a little bit clumsy. But yeah, we do get the basic idea. We do get what they want, right? Or what Cyrus wants and what the cult wants. I think that we get enough to understand what's going on, but beyond that, I don't think there's anything to him, and I don't think there has to be. I think he does his job in the story, but it's more like it absolutely felt to me like this was an established character who was maybe a minor character in the early movies and now is the main villain, and so we have it just felt this way, right? But I'm a little bit surprised to hear you say that he's a completely new character.
I believe he is. I don't want to give out false information, but I believe he is because even, like I said, I don't fully remember the previous movies if I watched it, but I do remember Elise saying that the previous family fought a demon, well, ghost or demon, whatever, and they pretty much beat him. However, that opened the door to a new villain, which was Cyrus. So I'm 90% sure he's a new villain. But I was gonna say the point that you made about the VHS tapes, isn't there realism in that? Because don't cults record
Sure.
what they do already? So they're already giving us the evidence.
I did say it makes sense, right? Like it makes sense for these tapes to exist. It makes sense for the cultists to watch them. I'm just saying, as a storytelling device, it's a bit clumsy because you are essentially just telling the audience what they need to know. And you just you have a character watch the video for a few minutes and then that catches up the audience. It's just not a very elegant way of doing exposition, I don't think. Especially since it's now at least the second time within a year that I've seen it. And that just, if that's the go-to mechanism for doing exposition, that's going to be annoying.
I see. I get what you mean. Okay.
So in general, I was surprised how this was not the most generic ghost story. And there were little details in here that I kind of liked. So one of them is how Cyrus loses control of the cult. Did you pick up on that?
Oh yeah, that, you know what? That at first when it happened, I was thinking, damn, they turned on him pretty quick, and I was trying to think back as to because they seem very loyal to him, right? So then when they just turned on him and killed him, I understand why they killed him, obviously because of the broken promise. That being said, there wasn't any inclination that would have happened on a broken promise, if that made sense. So I felt a bit 50-50 on it. And I was trying to think about, what did I miss anything when they were showing us things about the cult where pretty much their loyalty was fragile?
I don't think you did. I don't think there's any foreshadowing, especially since the ghosts are not characters, right? It's not like we get a scene where they talk to each other and that tells us what they think about Cyrus or why they follow him, right? Like they're non-characters in that way. But I always say about how one of the problems with Hollywood writers at the moment is that they don't know anything. They haven't done anything outside of screenwriting in their entire lives, and they've never cracked a book. And here, this is like straight out of history books, where dictators and cult leaders and all of these people tend to be really popular while they're winning. And then once they start losing, people turn on them very, very quickly. So there's no real loyalty. It's like we will put up with your methods and your brutality because we are along for the ride on the winning team. That's how that works. And I was surprised to see that play out in this movie, because I did not expect the writers of Insidious to understand this, because like Hollywood has like very specific ideas about morality and good and evil and conflict and so on, and it's all about people being good people or bad people, and that's why they do what they do. And here there was an actual calculation where Cyrus was in a very dangerous position, where he was in the position to promise these ghosts something very valuable, which is a way back into the physical world out of the further. And that is why they followed him, and that's why they obeyed his commands. And the same is probably true for the cultists who were working on the other side in order to get something out of them, probably eternal life or something like that. And the minute he starts losing, the minute it becomes clear that he will not be able to deliver what he has promised to them, they turn on him, because that way they get at least one soul as opposed to zero, right? So that was cool. I wish it was foreshadowed. I wished it was established in some way how Cyrus is either afraid of losing control of the cult and of the ghosts, or that he understands what his power derives from, and so he has a strategy for delivering on that, or there's some scene that demonstrates this concept of, we will support you as long as you're winning and no further, right? We will not go down with you, kind of that kind of mentality. And I think it would have been stronger if there had been some foreshadowing of any kind that seeded this idea. And then when it actually happens, you don't have to explain it anymore. I think in general, in screenwriting, I think it's a good idea to establish ideas first so that audiences are familiar with the concept. And then later in the story, you can just show them that it's happening and they will be primed to understand this concept, and then it just makes sense. And then you don't have to stop the story to explain to the audience what's going on. I think every time movies do this or shows do this, it can be very elegant when done correctly, and it just makes it feel more organic. Because you don't have to explain, like characters don't have to stop what they're doing to explain what they're doing, right? And here there's like a voiceover. I think Elise has a voiceover where she says something that explains why Cyrus is losing control, or maybe he says something. I don't remember, but it's explained in the moment, and that's a little bit clunky. But what happens makes sense, I think.
Yeah, I agree, because it wasn't foreshadowed at all. And I actually never knew that. Because I haven't seen a lot of cult documentaries. However, from the cult documentaries I have seen, a lot of them just pretty much follow their leader to the end. So I didn't know it was a thing.
It's less about cults and more about dictators and
yeah, okay.
Warlords and mob bosses and that sort of thing. Like while you are winning, people will do anything, and then they will jump ship very quickly when it turns out that you are beginning to lose, or you are not who you said you were, or it turns out you can't do the thing you've promised. People will jump ship immediately. So it's less about, like, you're right, cults have a tendency to stick with it to the bitter end, although often it's at gunpoint, right? Like that famous example about the Kool-Aid, right? You know that thing about the cult and drinking the Kool-Aid? So drinking the Kool-Aid is essentially being stupid and gullible. Because in the 90s, there was a cult that went into, I think, to Brazil, and they were waiting, I think, for an alien spaceship to pick them up. I think there was a comet, and that was supposed to be actually an alien spaceship. And the idea was that as the comet was passing Earth, that was actually an alien spaceship that would take them to paradise. They would kill themselves, and then their spirits would go into the spaceship, and then they would have eternal life. That was the promise. And they did this by drinking poisoned Kool-Aid, which is actually Flavor Aid, which is essentially like a punch kind of thing. It's like a sweet drink, and it's like you put this powder in water, and that makes a sweet drink, and then they put poison in there. And the story goes that they all drank the Kool-Aid and that's what killed them. And that's like a become a metaphor for just going with the herd and not thinking critically and not thinking for yourself. When actually, first of all, it was Flavor Aid, not Kool-Aid. Secondly, it was at gunpoint because the cult leader was saying, "I'm going to shoot your children if you don't drink this." And that is why everybody drank it. For 30 years, we've been blaming the victim when we use the phrase drinking the Kool-Aid. But you're right, like cults in general have a tendency to kind of stick with it to the bitter end. And they have a way of making you stick with it. But this whole idea of jumping ship when the leader starts showing weakness, that's more of a dictatorship kind of thing.
Okay. So you haven't seen the previous movies. So after watching this one, do you want to watch the other movies now? Has it made you kind of like intrigued to see the rest of the franchise?
Not really, and there's a few reasons for that. One of them is it seems to be accidental. It doesn't seem to be what these movies are about. I read somewhere that this movie is very different from the other 4 movies in terms of like how the further works, how the ghosts work, how the travel between them works. Like it all seems to be brand new. Like it's basically a new cosmology. Is that right?
I fully don't remember the previous movies. I just remember the family, but I just forgot what actually happened. So I'd have to watch it again.
Basically, what I read was that the way you go into the further and what the further is like and how the ghosts behave is the exact opposite of the previous movies. I don't know if that's the case or not because I haven't seen them. It seems to be a bit like, okay, we're in movie number 5. How can we keep this fresh? And they came up with a few ideas. And as a result, they stumbled onto a pretty neat idea about intergenerational solidarity masquerading as intergenerational trauma. Right, like the movie when you first watch it makes it seem like it's about trauma. It's actually about families sticking together across the generations and looking out for each other, which I think is a cool trick. Right, I think that's the part that really made this interesting. It does not seem to be what Insidious movies are about in general, and because of that, I don't want to see the other ones, right? Because they're not like this apparently. And if that's not right, then I'm happy to be corrected. The other aspect of this is that there's a lot of filler in this, and there's a lot of road horror stuff in this, and so it seems to be a lot like that. The interesting stuff in this movie is actually accidental, and the actual DNA of this is a lot of just general creepiness and ghosts going after people and creepy dreams and that sort of thing. And that's the kind of horror that I'm not interested in. I like psychological horror. I like things that cultivate dread and are character focused and that have interesting lore and cosmologies, as opposed to just jump scares. Like I do not find jump scares interesting or scary or entertaining at all. I'm mad every time I fall for one because it's so cheap. And to this movie's credit, it doesn't do that much of that. There's maybe 3 or 4. I was expecting more, but it still seems to be kind of in the DNA of Insidious. That is just what people show up for. I actually was in a fairly full showing on a Saturday afternoon, so I was actually surprised to see that many people in there. And there were like 5 teenagers in the front row, and they were talking and laughing for the first 15 minutes, and then they became quieter and quieter. And by the end of it, they were as quiet as all the adults and were just watching the story, which I thought was kind of interesting because 20 minutes into the movie, they were still laughing at things that weren't funny. Like every time something scary happened or something that was supposed to be scary or even a character moment, right? Like when Gemma was going through something difficult, they were laughing at the screen. It's like, oh no, this again. Like, can you just stay home? Do that at home with your mates on the couch watching a streaming movie? Why do you pay all this money to laugh at a movie? I don't get it, especially a movie that's not a train wreck, right? Like this is not the kind of this is a pretty competently made movie. I don't like all its pieces, but it's a proper movie in that way, right? It's not something you go to laugh at. I don't think I've seen much worse horror movies in the last 2 years. But I was kind of interested to see that they kind of calmed down over the course of the movie, and when the movie got interesting, they were interested. So I don't know how they saw it, but that's what it looked like from where I was sitting.
Honestly, bro, I don't want to go to the extreme to say I flipping hate kids, but when it comes to the cinema and you just see them walk through the doors, that's the dread that you feel. You're like, oh God.
It's like 5 or 6 20-year-olds or 18-year-olds. Like it's in a cheap horror movie. Like that's the ingredients, right? Like that's the checklist. The more boxes you check on that list, the more likely it is that they're going to behave this way. And I've experienced it. It doesn't happen every time, but it happens a bunch of times. And it's interesting that between Obsession and Backrooms, there's all this talk about how Gen Z is rescuing cinema and just give them a proper story and they will show up again. And like it's just 2 movies where this is the case so far, apparently. But my experience has always been that Gen Z simply does not take movies seriously. Like it's not something you really are genuinely interested in or genuinely take serious or genuinely enjoy, it's like trash. It's like reality TV or something. You watch it because it's bad,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And I'm still not sure which way this will go. Maybe it's just people getting older and therefore take things more seriously or something. I don't know. But for years now, that had been my impression, that if you're under 20, you just don't think movies are real, like real entertainment.
I definitely understand where you're coming from. I just think, obviously, our generation is a generation that has, because pretty much the only place you could find movies is literally the cinema or the Chinaman that's selling the DVDs down the road. So that would literally, or TV. But movies generally, it was such a big thing back in the day of previous generations because mainly it would be in the cinema. But now because there's home streaming, it's a thing where I understand why I wouldn't have agreed with that statement that Gen Z are pretty much going to be the ones that, what was it, bring back cinema, or was it the
Basically, yeah, that things like Obsession are a big success because of Gen Z audiences. They are making it a success.
I wouldn't fully agree with that, but I do understand. I think if there was a movie that appealed to Gen Z, obviously we saw what Obsession and done what Backrooms done, because a lot of our generation grew up to obviously Backrooms in terms of the backstory of it, obviously the YouTuber. Same with the Obsessions, 'cause obviously the directors, they had a lot of short films on YouTube as well, and they were quite successful on YouTube. They weren't too big, but they had a couple, I think a couple million views on a couple of their short films too. So it's things that you kind of like grow up on. Like it's the same movie with, what's that film? I didn't even watch it, but it was the gaming film that Jason Momoa was in as well.
Minecraft.
Yes, exactly. So I definitely do think if it's a film that is our kind of like our nostalgia, or is something which, like I said, we grew up on, then I definitely think we'll definitely do make noise when it comes to the box office sales. But in general, I don't think our generation is the generation that would bring back cinema. Because like I said, we have access to, so like from YouTube to home streaming to cinema. It's just that there's just too much going on for us. So I wouldn't have been surprised if we were the death of cinema, to be fair.
My theory for the longest time was that if you are 25 or younger, pretty much until last year, movies were complete train wrecks, like Marvel movies, DC, so like superhero movies, bad franchise movies. The mid to late 2010s were not a good time to get into movies, right? Because all the big franchises kind of crashed and burned, and even the ones that made money were often not very good. And the really big names, the big franchises you would recognize, were first of all already like 40, 50 years old, and you were basically getting your parents or grandparents thing in terms of what stories were being presented. So there were basically very few, outside of small streaming shows, there basically wasn't anything that told Gen Z stories until like last year, essentially. And if your formative years for movies were the mid to late 2010s, you were being raised on garbage fires, essentially. And I don't blame anybody for thinking that movies are just a medium on their way out. There's kind of a narrative of finally somebody is presenting these kids with like real movies, and what do you know, they like them and they show up to see them. And I think it's too early to tell how this will go. Like movies in general have had a long decline, where they started out as essentially the only mass entertainment, and they've been losing market share ever since, like since the 30s basically, or 50s. I think 50s is when broadcast TV really became available, and that immediately took a bite out of the market share of cinema. Because when you look at the long-term trend, every time people get an alternative to cinema, they choose the alternative. And that is why over time, watching movies in the cinema has been in decline, right? It's broadcast TV, it's VHS, it's DVD, it's Blu-ray, it's streaming, social media. Every time, like video games as well, every time something competes for your attention, or there's a new thing that competes for your attention compared to movies lose out, like as in watching movies in the cinema. That has kind of just been the pattern for like 70 years. And so there has to be a tipping point where the new generation just is unconvinced that movies are a real thing. And I think we are kind of at the point where that is beginning to turn a little bit. And for me, movies are my primary form of entertainment, right? I would rather watch a movie than a TV show, or or play a video game. Like that's how I want to experience stories, and that not being dead is a good thing. We see this reflected in the box office as well. I looked at our statistics for the movies we've reviewed this year, and only science fiction as a genre lost money this year so far. Everything else is positive, like overall, right? Like drama overall makes money, fantasy overall makes money, superheroes overall make money, horror overall makes money, and so on. And that was not true in previous years. In previous years, it was basically horror and superheroes that made money. Everything else was just a losing proposition because people viewed it as disposable that you would watch on Netflix when it was there in 3 months. And if that's the case, why would you go through the effort and expense of buying a cinema ticket? And all the Insidious movies have made money. I just went through the catalog just yesterday just to see what they were like, and they all have like 8x, 10x, 12x multipliers because they're so cheap, but they're reliable crowd pleasers. And this one is no different. I think this one is like between 4 and 5x at this moment, basically the Monday after the first weekend. And on the one hand, I don't think this is a great story necessarily, or the kind of thing I would want to see succeed necessarily, but it is succeeding. And people are getting enjoyment out of these movies and showing up for the next one. And maybe after they've seen all of them, they will ask, okay, what else is out there? And so that's a positive, I think.
Yeah, I don't even think, because I remember in previous years there were quite a few streaming movies that would be trending on Twitter, for example. But as of this year, even maybe even last, I haven't really seen any film from streaming that's trending in a positive light. So I definitely would say it is a good season for just cinema in general and for movies, especially when it comes to horror. So Insidious dropped at a great time. So I was even surprised when I saw that it made 60 million because, like you said, I did check their the box office sales for their franchise in general, and it is always making money. So with this one as well, with what's previously coming out and how well they've done from Backrooms to Obsession, I'm definitely not surprised. It's already a film that's a franchise already. So they have that as well as the momentum from the horror genre and how well it's doing this year, pretty much when it comes to the film industry.
Mm-hmm. Anything else to say about Insidious? I feel like there's not that much to it, right? Like it's a pretty simple story. Like even what do you think about the dream heist? Like having seen the other Insidious movies, did that work for you? Was that fun?
The dream heist?
Yeah. So when they go into the dream deliberately in order to trap Cyrus in the red door.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's cool. I don't really have much to say on it. I do think it was nice to watch in terms of just horror. I don't want to say it was generic, but it wasn't anything that was a highlight for me if in that scene. But it was nice to watch. I do think it was. I've seen scenes like that where people purposely go into danger. I've seen stuff like that already, so I don't think it was something which blew my mind, but it was cool.
I think the basic idea is pretty simple, and even when it goes off the rails in pretty much exactly the way you would think it would. But then pretty much everything in the movie is really drawn out. It takes forever. Like this whole thing where Nick goes into the neighbor's house and tries to take out the cultists in order to make Cyrus vulnerable. That took forever. Like it just kept going and it just kept adding. Like it wasn't even a complication. It just took forever. And that was kind of something where I was kind of bored and said, can you just get to the point? Like this is not that complicated.
But you have to look for the old people though.
And they even do this whole thing. Like I like heist movies a lot, and so I smiled a little bit when they did the big planning scene, which shows how it should go, which tells you it's not going to go like this, right? It's going to go off the rails right away, and it does. But this whole thing about the grapefruits, where they're doing like reenacting the sequence of events with the different characters, it's kind of silly, but it was kind of fun.
What scene is that?
What's her name? Is Claire? Claire is, I think, the tattoo artist, right? Who's the medium?
Yeah.
She says this whole thing about when you are a tattoo artist, you actually have to practice on grapefruits because grapefruit skin is like human skin. And then she shows up at Gemma's house with a bag full of grapefruits, and she tattoos the faces of everybody involved onto the grapefruits and uses that to reenact how the heist is supposed to go.
Yeah. I can't remember.
Like, I'm not saying it shouldn't have been there. I'm just saying it's totally unnecessary because it's not that complicated. And it's just like somebody thought of that and was really proud of it. And so they put it in, but it's not necessary.
Hey man, that's their thing.
But just to go back to like the whole dream heist thing, I kind of asked the question because I had not seen the other movies and therefore I don't know how the further is supposed to behave. And it seems to me like the further is a pretty safe place to be, right? Unless Cyrus is right there in front of you, there's not much else going on there. Like it's not like a dangerous place by itself.
No. That's actually what I can say. So my memory's a bit foggy on this, but I do know the further is a dangerous place because I remember, I think in the previous movies, especially the father, they will intentionally go into the further, and I forgot what the mission was, but they'll look for something or they'll need to do something in the further, and there is danger in the further, so it is a dangerous place. So them actually going into the further, and in terms of doing the whole heist thing, that's maybe a new concept, but actually going into the further and them encountering danger, that is something that regularly happens there.
But as portrayed in this movie, it's not that hazardous, right? Like, yes, there are the ghosts around, but that's because they are part of the cult and they're waiting for Gemma and they're guarding the door and all of that, right? But the place itself, like, there's no real danger. And it sounds to me like in the other movies, it was a lot more dangerous.
There is definitely danger further though. I'm trying to figure out how it would kind of like link into the real world, because obviously here there's a courier, their couriers bringing the spirits into the real world, but from there does the spirit go into, I think the spirit would possess whoever went into the further, and then obviously they'll be in their body in the real world.
None of which happens in this movie, right? Like, the only danger comes from Cyrus and the cult. The different ghosts, all the cultists, they're all directly working for Cyrus.
Yeah, but there's still spirits though, and spirits were in the previous movies in the further.
Yeah, but it's not a property of the further. There's not other stuff in the further that is dangerous. Just being in the further seems to be pretty safe, unless the cult is there.
I get what you mean. But to be fair though, in the previous movies, they did say that they killed pretty much the head honcho, who was pretty much the head, I wouldn't say the head of the further, but who was pretty much the villain in the further at the time. And obviously he died. So I'm sure he came with a bunch of his spirits. I don't know if he was something, I don't believe he was some sort of cult leader, but I'm sure they were occupied by him, the main villain, and other spirits in there as well. I'm sure when he died, probably they died with him. But that obviously opened the door to Cyrus.
But it seems like the further by itself is just empty. Like, there does not seem to be any real problem with going there by itself. What's the danger?
Sorry, I get what you mean, but the way you said that just sounded so funny and crazy. There's no, there's no danger in you going into the further.
In this movie, there isn't. You can imagine a whole bunch of different things. There could be just monsters in the further in a way that is just dangerous. And Cyrus kind of has carved out his little corner of it. But outside of that, it's just hazardous. Or it might be the kind of thing where you get lost easily and you never come back. Or it might be full of tormented souls that will attack you. Or something, a thousand things. And I think part of why I had a hard time getting into the mythology of this is that it's so small. There's Cyrus's immediate plan and Gemma's and Elise's immediate plan of trapping Cyrus, but nothing else exists. And like, going into the further does not seem to be difficult by itself or dangerous by itself. The only problem is that there are these ghosts just waiting there because they are stalking Gemma, right? And I think that actually undermines how scary this whole thing is, because for me, the major comparison is Stranger Things with the Upside Down, which also ended up being really empty and boring. But in the first season, at least, every time somebody went into the Upside Down, it was this really weird and creepy and dangerous place where you had no idea what could be around the next corner. And that kind of didn't really go anywhere as the series went on, and kind of became more domesticated in a way. And here it might, I have a feeling it's a similar thing. And now I kind of want to watch the earlier movies just to see if the further actually is dangerous and scary by itself. And it sounds like it's supposed to be, but by this movie, it's just not anymore. And that made the whole thing feel very clinical. Like, I've seen like movies about like psychics and astral projection and stuff like this, where people go to the magical place. Like, they go to sleep and then they project their consciousness into some other dimension and then do stuff there. This is probably the most boring version of all of those I've seen, because like, what's going on there? Like, there's nothing to it. There's a red door, which I guess is significant if you saw. I think movie number 4 is the red door, right?
I think there's 6 movies in total, so I think the 5th one is the red door.
I thought this was number 5, but in any case, a previous movie is the red door, which introduces the idea, and I did not get very much out of it in terms of what the red door is. Watching this as the first Insidious movie, I kind of understood that it's like a deeper place in the further, and if you can trap somebody in there, they can't come out, not even Cyrus, which is fair enough. But the entire thing is just really empty. I don't think they ever do anything interesting with the further either being an alien place or being kind of a reflection of the real world that then gets more twisted as you go deeper into it, or something. There's all sorts of things you could have done with this, and I don't think they did anything with it. It's just really empty and really clinical.
It's all kind of hard to say that if you haven't seen the previous movies, though.
I'm kind of getting the impression that this movie breaks with the previous movies, that it's just not the same.
No, what I'm trying to say is because you haven't seen the previous movies, and even though I have seen it, I still don't remember the previous movies, so it's very hard to comment on the further, is what I'm trying to say. So I'm pretty sure, though, in the previous movies, the further is way scarier, and I think the red door is what separates them from this, the scary stuff behind the red door. But I'm pretty sure, though, that the further is an actual scary place. I just think you need to have prior knowledge to this movie. The one that we just saw. So I would recommend you just watch like at least trailers. If you're not going to watch the movie, then watch at least trailers to kind of get a rough picture of what the further could be, and obviously the dangers of the further. Because I'm 100% sure that the further is actually a scarier place. It's just that in this specific movie alone, it just served a purpose which portrayed the further as a place which was empty.
I think it's intended to be that, right? It's intended to be scary and dangerous and treacherous, but based on what's shown in this movie and how characters behave, it's just not. It's just an empty place. This might be to the detriment of the movie. I think what saves it is that the one thing Gemma finds there is her mother. And that's where she kind of reconciles with her mother and sees things from her perspective. And we see this scene where she kills herself by bashing her head against the bathroom tiles. And we see that recontextualized, right? Where in the beginning, Gemma sees her do this, and then I think somebody slams the door shut. And it looks it looks one way from Gemma's point of view. But when you see the bird's eye view, you can see how the mother was trapping Cyrus, was taking Cyrus down with her in order to keep him away from Gemma. That's what was going on there. And I think that's the point at which it flips from generational trauma to generational solidarity. Because that happens in the further, I think it's okay, or at least it's not nothing in that sense. If that wasn't there, then there would be nothing at all. That would be a real problem. But because that scene happens in the further, and then the actual confrontation with Cyrus as well, I think that saves it. But I think just as an observation of, is this interesting? Does it make me want to see more of the movies? Does it make me curious about how this world works? No, it doesn't. I didn't have any questions about what the further was after seeing this movie.
No, I agree with that. It doesn't make you want to dive into the further.
But in general, what the further is and what it's like being there and so on, that should be kind of one of the core appeals, I think, of the franchise. I think it should be the thing that kind of drives the story in a way, and outside of the mechanics of what the courier does, there's not much else going on there. It's a problem. And also the fact that the couriers themselves make this whole thing very open, right? It seems to be like in the previous movies, you went into the further because you had to, and you were glad if you made it out alive. That's kind of my impression, the impression I get. And here the couriers, the whole point of the couriers is they can go back and forth, and they can blur the lines between the two, which automatically makes the further less scary.
But I think in the previous movies as well, they could go into the further. It's just that they just couldn't bring anything out.
It makes it less mysterious and less alien.
I really need to go and watch the previous. I'm not going to watch the whole movies, but I'm just going to watch the trailers to just re-jog my memory, because I've gone so blank. It's just so hard to comment on certain things. Because I like the point that you're making in terms of the further not being a scary place. I'm 100% sure it's a scary place. I just forgot. And I think it's a thing where if they leave the red door, they can take possession of someone in the real world. I think that's it. Because it seems like in this one, they actually transport the whole spirit and they come into physical form into the real world. Whereas in, obviously, the previous one movies, I think they take possession of the red door. They take possession of their victim. I think that's it. And if they do, I just forgot how.
The whole idea is that the courier, once they become practiced and strong enough, they can take entire entities with them. And so they can start taking ghosts with them into the physical world. And that's the end game of Cyrus, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that makes sense. I'm just not sure it improves kind of the mystique of the further. But I don't know, it's hard to say without having seen the other movies. Any other thoughts on Insidious?
No, unless you've got anything else, I think it might be time to close up.
Yeah, I think we've got it.
Last thoughts. I'm going to give this film at first, I was going to give it a 5 out of 10. However, after today's conversation, I'm going to bump it up to, I felt like saying 6, but I don't think I'd be true to myself if I say this. So I'll say 5.5 out of 10. It was above average, because 5 out of 10 is average, and it did have a message behind it. So I will give it that. And it had things which I liked. I think one thing I do appreciate is in general, I don't have an issue with jump scares. However, with this one, there wasn't as much, but they did compensate with certain sequences, especially the whole fort, the what do they call it, like a fort house, the thing that you build in the living room, as well as like the message that they were trying to portray when it comes to inheritance and generational trauma and just the cults and etc. So I definitely do appreciate their attempts and certain things. They did successfully attempt it. It's just that it wasn't done too great, especially when it comes to the foreshadowing of the daughter's abilities, as well as the cult's loyalty being so fragile. But overall, like I said, it was. I wasn't mad at what I watched. I just felt like I had a pretty okay experience with this one. So yeah, I'm gonna give this one a 5.5 out of 10. Yeah,
I enjoyed this movie more than I thought I would. Went going in expecting not very much. First act very much confirmed all my suspicions, and then as the movie went on, it kept getting increasingly better and more interesting. I think there's a whole bunch of interesting ideas in this, and as they relate to Gemma and her journey and how she relates to the rest of her family and what she does and why she does it and so on. I think that's perfectly serviceable, bordering on good. The problem is there's way too much filler in this and way too much generic stuff that kind of pads out the movie. It's already not the longest movie, and as if almost half of it is filler or things that don't relate to what's interesting about this movie, that's not a good place to be. So that's overall a 5 out of 8. Not as bad as I thought it would be, but significant room for improvement.
Hi guys, thank you very much for tuning into today's discussion.
So if you've made it this far and you like what we do, please tell a friend. And if you hate what we do, please tell an enemy.
Hi guys, we are the Eye of the Storm podcast, and we'll catch you next time. Au revoir.
Bye bye.